Today I'm going to tell you a story from the Wild West, where a ragged maid, ugly to the eye with a freckled face and tangled hair, hides a secret that would shake an entire town. A gallant, handsome cowboy finds himself falling in love with a woman everyone else mocks as unbearably plain. A plot to seize a silver mine and a truth revealed under the glow of lantern light before the whole community. Can love overcome deception? Can justice prevail without a single gunshot fired? Join me on this gripping journey. And if you love Western tales, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episode. The desert sun was sliding toward the horizon, throwing long copper streaks across the sand and painting the sky in shades of rose and blood. The air tasted of dust and metal. At the Redstone mining yard, the day's labor had ended, but the yard was far from still. Men pressed together in a restless ring, boots grinding grit into the packed earth, voices rising in anger. In the center of the circle stood a woman, her back hunched as though to make herself smaller, her hands clutching a leather sack that clinked heavily with every movement. She was not a figure who inspired sympathy. Her dress was gray and patched, its seams straining where it had been crudely repaired. Grease stains marked the bodice. The hem was torn and frayed, her hair red-brown under the grime, spilled in wild tangles, tied only by a scrap of cloth. Her face seemed an unkind canvas, freckles dotted so thickly that they blurred into one another. A mole the size of a kernel of corn sat beside her mouth, and an ugly dark birthmark bloomed over her left cheek. To the miners, she was just the ugly maid, the clumsy girl who fetched water and scrubbed pots. No one in Redstone gave her a second thought, except in this moment when they believed they had caught her stealing. She had the silver on her, one miner shouted, shaking his fist. Caught red-handed, another cried. A thief and a liar, Harlan Pike pushed through the crowd. He was tall and broad, his shoulders filling his dark coat, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. He carried authority like a whip, every word snapping against the men around him. His eyes glittered with cold satisfaction as he surveyed the trembling figure before him. Bind her wrists, Harlan ordered. She'll answer to the sheriff at dawn. The miners surged forward, ropes ready. Sarah's lips parted, and she shook her head, but her protest was drowned in the noise of the mob. A rough hand caught her arm. The sack swung, bars of dull metal clattering inside, proof enough for men eager to condemn. And then a voice cut cleanly through the chaos. Hold it right there. The miners turned. Out of the settling dust walked a man with a stride that was steady, unhurried, but commanding all the same. The sunset struck sparks along the lines of his face, rugged and handsome, worn by trail dust, but unbowed. A revolver rested on his hip, though he had not touched it. He carried himself with the calm of someone who did not need to draw a weapon to be dangerous. Michael Hart had ridden into Redstone that very afternoon, a wanderer in search of work. Now, he found himself stepping into a storm. What's the charge? Michael asked, his voice level. Caught her stealing bars from the mine, Harlan said, lips curling. Plain as day. Michael's gaze shifted to the sack. He crouched, his hand brushing the dirt, and asked quietly, if it's silver, then it can be proved. Someone bring me acid. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A thin boy darted to the assay shed and returned with a small vial. Harlan's jaw tightened. There's no need for theatrics. There's every need. Michael cut him off, his tone steel. Truth, don't fear a test. The bars were dropped onto the packed earth, 3 dull ingots catching the fading light. Michael uncorked the vial. Sarah held her breath, eyes wide beneath her soot. With slow precision, Michael tipped a drop onto the surface. The gray metal hissed, bubbled, and blackened. Gasps broke from the crowd. Not silver, Michael said simply. Lead-plated and worthless. The mob fell silent. Accusations died on tongues. A man swore under his breath. Another kicked the dirt. Their anger drained away, leaving only confusion. Sarah sagged the sack, clutched to her chest as though it might shield her heart. Harlan's face twitched. For a moment, fury burned there before he mastered it. "Then she's a fool dragging around scrap," he said with a sneer. "Still deserves a whipping for wasting the company's time." "Or," Michael said, evenly rising to his full height, "someone planted that scrap to frame her." His eyes locked with Harlan's. The overseer's jaw worked, but he said nothing. In that pause, something glittered. Michael's gaze caught on a small locket, half hidden at Sarah's throat. The sunset's last rays sparked off silver filigree before she jerked, tucking it hastily beneath her rags. Michael stored the detail away, saying nothing. The miners began to shuffle back toward their bunkhouses. No theft, no crime, only suspicion left hanging in the air. Harlan barked at them to move, and they obeyed, though more slowly than usual. Michael stepped toward Sarah. "You all right, miss?" Her eyes sharp, despite the grime flicked to his face. Her voice rasped, forced rough and high. "Didn't ask for help." "Maybe not," Michael replied. "But you got it anyway." He tipped his hat, then turned. Out of the corner of his eye he saw her wipe at her cheek. The dark birthmark smudged faintly under her fingers. The freckles shifted. Paint, Michael thought. Not nature. Something about this maid was not what it seemed. A night fell over Redstone. Lanterns glowed against the black, casting golden pools of light that shivered in the wind. Michael found himself in the foreman's office, facing Harlan across a desk cluttered with papers. "I'm looking for work," Michael said. His voice was calm, his stance relaxed, though his eyes scanned every corner of the room. Harlan leaned back. He didn't like drifters, especially ones who embarrassed him. "Stable work. Muck out stalls, haul water. Pays weekly." "That suit you?" Michael nodded. "Suits me fine." As he turned, his eyes caught the ledger lying open. Columns stopped mid-line. Pages had been torn clean away. Michael frowned. Sloppy books were a warning sign, and he never ignored signs. Outside, he passed the kitchen door and halted. A flicker of candlelight caught his attention. Sarah sat bent over another ledger, her face half in shadow. Her hand moved swiftly, quill, scratching the script, flowing neat and elegant. Far too neat for a maid. Michael watched, silent. She closed the book, quickly slipping it beneath her shawl when she realized he was there. "Don't you have horses to tend?" she snapped, her voice pitched harsh again. Michael smiled faintly. "Guess I do. You keep those numbers safe." He left her to her candle, the flame dancing across her features. Behind the freckles, behind the mole, and the blotched cheek, her eyes shone with intelligence and something more, a determination she fought to hide. Michael walked into the night, the desert stretching dark and endless. He had seen enough lies in his life to recognize their scent. This mine stank of them, and the strange maid, ugly in paint, but sharp in spirit, was tied to its secrets somehow. He would find out how. Behind him, in the flickering light, Sarah Vale blew out her candle. The disguise clung to her skin, but beneath it beat the heart of the true heiress of Redstone. For now, her secret remained intact. But the game had begun, and the first move had been played. The following morning broke sharp and bright, the sky a hard enamel blue, stretched wide over the desert. Dust carried the smell of horse sweat and iron, a scent as much a part of Redstone as the rocks themselves. Michael Hart had risen early, as was his habit, and made his way toward the stables with a bucket in hand. Inside, the air was thick with hay leather and the restless snorts of animals who disliked confinement. One stall in particular rang with the frantic stamping of hooves. A young bay mare, recently purchased, tossed her head and struck the wood with enough force to splinter it. Stable boys muttered curses, none daring to go near. Wild as the devil, One grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Bit me clean through the glove yesterday." Michael studied the horse. She was young, her muscles tight with fear rather than malice. He stepped forward, slow, steady. Then another sound broke the tense air, a sharp, clear whistle. Every head turned. At the far end of the stable stood the maid Sarah, in her patched dress hair, tangled freckles smeared across her skin. She should have looked pitiful, yet her stance was sure. Her lips pursed as she whistled again, a melody rising and falling like a language. The mare's ears pricked. Her frantic movements slowed, head cocking toward the sound. Sarah approached, one hand extended, her steps light, as though she floated. Another whistle, lower this time, coaxing. To the astonishment of the stable hands, the mare stilled, nostrils flaring, then lowered her head against Sarah's palm. Michael blinked. He had seen seasoned wranglers spend hours breaking a horse, often with ropes and force. This girl, this so-called clumsy scullery maid, had soothed the beast in moments, with nothing but sound and patience. "Well, be damned, a stable boy," muttered. Sarah stroked the mare's neck, whispering calmly. For the briefest moment, the light shifted across her face, stripping away the grime and freckles to reveal a hint of delicate cheekbones beneath. Michael caught his breath, but then the moment passed. She straightened, scowled, and muttered, "Some folks don't know patience, that's all." Michael leaned against the stall door, a slow smile tugging his lips. "Looks to me like you've got more than patience, miss." That was a gift. Her eyes darted to him, wary. "Just practice. Animals are easier than people." Michael tilted his head. "Sometimes truer than you think." Later that day, the kitchen bustled with the clatter of pots and the hiss of boiling stew. The miners would soon return from their shift, and the cooks worked fast to prepare. Sarah sat at a narrow table in the corner, a stack of ledgers and loose sheets before her. Her fingers moved deftly, eyes sharp, as she scanned the columns of figures. Michael entered with a sack of flour slung over his shoulder. He set it down, then paused, watching her. Her quill danced with the grace of someone trained, not the scrawl of a servant barely taught letters. "You've got numbers wrong," Sarah said suddenly, her voice firm. She jabbed at the ledger. "This column here, Harlan marked 30 men for wages, but only 27 worked that day." The head cook frowned. "That can't be right. Harlan keeps the books." Sarah snorted. "Then Harlan can't count. Look." She flipped another page, aligning the lists with swift precision. 3 names repeated, and the sums don't match. The men are being shorted. Michael stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. He saw it clearly now. Duplication, missing numbers, sloppy adjustments meant to skim coins without raising alarm. Sarah's eyes burned with quiet outrage, though she tried to mask it beneath her freckled disguise. "You've got a sharp eye," Michael said. Sarah glanced up, lips pressing tight. "Someone has to, else good men go hungry." Michael's jaw tightened. He had suspected something rotten. This was proof. Harlan was bleeding the miners slow, not enough to stir revolt, but enough to line his own pockets. He studied Sarah again, her penmanship neat as a schoolteacher's. The contradiction nagged at him. No maid wrote like that. Evening fell, shadows stretching long across the yard. Michael made his rounds through the storage shed, checking locks on wagons and barrels. The place smelled of old timber and metallic dust. He tugged a tarp aside, revealing crates stacked high with ore samples, waiting to be hauled to town. A faint glimmer caught his eye. On a shelf nearby lay a pair of gloves, thick leather, stained with grime. Michael picked one up. Against the lamplight, fine gray powder clung to the fingertips, almost invisible unless examined close. He rubbed it between thumb and forefinger. The texture was unmistakable silver dust, though oddly coarse, as if ground from poor ore. Michael frowned. Gloves left carelessly behind weren't unusual. But these were Harlan's. He had seen the overseer wear them daily. The dust meant contact with ore shipments, perhaps even tampered ones. Michael lifted the glove to his nose and sniffed. The faint tang of lead struck him sharp and wrong. Silver didn't smell like that. Footsteps echoed. Michael slipped the glove back, masking his expression as Harlan strode into the shed. The overseer's gaze flicked over him, cold suspicion lurking in the corners. "Stable hand poking around where he don't belong," Harlan said. "Just making sure the wagons are ready," Michael answered easily, brushing dust from his hands. Harlan stepped closer, looming. "See, you keep your nose to horses, not business that ain't yours." Michael tipped his hat, masking the tension in his chest. But as he left, his mind burned with questions. The gloves, the false wages, the frightened mare, calmed by Sarah's song, it all pointed to secrets tangled deep beneath the mind. And Sarah Vale, in her rags and paint, was at the center of them all. The next 2 days passed under the blistering sun, the mine working as it always did, picks clanging, carts rattling, men shouting above the din. Yet an unease hung in the air. The miners grumbled of short rations, whispers of missing ore floated through the bunkhouses, and every conversation seemed to circle back to the same question: who was stealing from Redstone? By late afternoon on the 3rd day, the rumor turned fact. A wagon meant for the assay office in town never arrived. Its driver swore he had yet out on the road load secure, but by the time the wagon reached the canyon pass, it was empty. The silver bars had vanished into thin air. Harlan thundered across the yard, his voice booming accusations. "Someone here is skimming shipments," he bellowed. "Mark me thieves among us." His glare cut across the men lingering on the maids and boys who had no voice to defend themselves. Sarah's shoulders, hunched, slipped away from the crowd, though Michael noticed her eyes scanning the yard with more calculation than fear. Michael's gut told him the theft wasn't simple banditry. Too clean, too deliberate. He waited until the uproar dimmed, then rode out with his horse tracing the wagon's trail. Hoofbeats crunched over dry earth, following the ruts cut deep by heavy wheels. They veered from the main road, slipping down a lesser-used track, the one that led toward the abandoned barn, an old storage shed left to rot when the new warehouses were built. The structure loomed at the edge of the valley, weathered boards groaning in the wind. Its roof sagged, but the lock on the door gleamed suspiciously new. Michael dismounted silently, crouching near the wheel ruts. The ground told its story plain. The missing wagon had come this way. Inside, faint light leaked through the cracks. Michael stepped softly toward the door, meaning to listen. But before he reached it, movement caught his eye through a gap in the planks. A figure bent over a heavy iron chest in the far corner. Red hair spilled loose from a crooked kerchief. The familiar ragged dress hung about her frame. Sarah. Michael's brows knit. She was alone, candlelight, throwing her shadow high against the wall. From beneath her bodice, she drew a small silver locket, its filigree catching the flame. She pressed a hidden catch, and a thin key slid into her fingers. With careful precision, she slid it into the lock of the chest. A soft click, then the lid creaked open. Michael's chest tightened. A maid with a key to the company ledgers. The thought bit sharp. He stepped inside, boots thudding deliberately. "That's a mighty curious talent for a kitchen girl," he said. Sarah froze. The ledger hovered in her hands, pages fluttering in the draft. She turned, eyes wide, then narrowed with defiance. "You followed me." "Hard not to when the trail leads straight here," Michael replied. His gaze dropped to the open chest, the locket key still dangling. "Care to explain why you were cracking locks and stealing ledgers?" Her jaw tightened. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the sigh of the barn walls. Then she snapped the book shut and clutched it to her chest. "I'm not stealing," she said, her voice low, but fierce. "I'm searching. Someone is sabotaging this mine, and I intend to find out who." Michael's eyes narrowed. "That's a bold claim." And what's it to you? Her fingers trembled on the ledger, but her gaze burned steady. Because no one else will. Harlan's cooking the books. Men are losing wages, shipments vanish, and when blame is cast, it falls on people like me. If I don't uncover the truth, they'll hang me next. Michael studied her in the dim light. The grime and freckles, the ugly disguise, could not hide the intensity of her words. There was intelligence, resolve, and something more, a desperate courage. You expect me to believe you're just a maid playing detective in your spare time? He asked. Sarah swallowed hard. Believe what you want. But I've got eyes, same as you. And I've kept records. This isn't the first shipment to vanish, and it won't be the last. If you care about fairness, you'll keep quiet about what you saw. She stepped closer, the ledger pressed between them. Her whisper was urgent. Please, Michael. If Harlan finds out I've been in the ledgers, he'll destroy me. But if you help me, if you keep this secret, we can expose him. Michael hesitated. His instincts screamed caution. He had lived too long by the rule of evidence, not sentiment. Yet something in her plea struck true. He remembered the mare quieted by her song, the sharp corrections in the wage books, the look in her eyes, now half defiance, half fear. He exhaled slowly. All right, I won't tell Harlan. But I'll be watching, and if you're lying, I'm not. She cut in fierce. I want justice, same as you. A fragile pact settled in the barn air. Michael nodded once. Then we'll work quiet. No one else needs to know. Sarah's shoulders eased. She tucked the locket back beneath her rags, hiding the key. Thank you, she murmured, though her tone carried more resolve than gratitude. Michael turned toward the door but paused. One thing. You handle those ledgers like you've done it all your life. That ain't something most kitchen girls know. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. After a beat, she said only, I read when I can. That's all. It was not the whole truth. Michael knew it. But he also knew pushing further would gain nothing tonight. He tipped his hat and stepped into the cool desert dark. Behind him, Sarah blew out the candle, plunging the barn into shadow. Secrets pressed heavy in the silence, but for the first time, she was not alone in carrying them. The desert had a way of swallowing secrets. By day, the sun bleached them dry. By night, the wind scattered them across the mesa. Michael Hart knew this better than most. He had made a life of carrying other people's truths, delivered, weighed, and judged. Now, as he leaned against the rail outside the bunkhouse, he felt the weight of his own pressing down harder than the desert skiway. The bank had sent him here silent and unseen to measure Redstone's worth. If the ledgers bled too much, red foreclosure would follow. He told himself it was just another job yet. Every time he saw the maid with the locket and the fierce eyes, the lie pressed harder against his chest. He did not know if he was here to protect her or betray her. He exhaled, shoulders taut. Duty and desire pulled him in opposite directions, the rope threatening to snap. Inside the office, Sarah spread ledgers across the table, her freckles still painted thick, though Michael had learned to see past them. If we're going to stop him, she said, voice taut, we need proof. No one can ignore it. Michael nodded. Proof was the only language the law listened to. Then we make our own bait. A shipment that can't be denied. She frowned. Bait. He drew a small pouch from his pocket. Inside, fine dust shimmered faintly even in the lantern's dim glow. Fluorescent powder. Catch it in a flame and it shines like fireflies. If Harlan touches it, it'll cling to him. Can't wash it away. Her eyes widened. And you carry that? Why, Michael's smile was humorless. You pick up tricks when you've been chasing cheats long enough. Together they worked in secrecy. In the dark of the warehouse, they stacked 3 bars of true silver, dusting them with the glowing powder, then packed them among ordinary ingots. Sarah sealed the crates, her hands steady, despite the risk. Michael watched her, struck again by the paradox, a woman who wore rags, but carried herself like someone born to command. The shipment was scheduled for dawn, but dawn never saw it whole. That night, clouds gathered over the desert, thick and bruised. Rain began as a hiss, then poured in sheets, drumming on the tin roofs. Lanterns guttered in the wind. In the blackness, shadows moved where no miner should be. Harlan's men, silent, swift, with oilskin cloaks, slipped into the yard. They had overheard whispers enough to know a special load was coming. Michael lay restless in the bunkhouse, ears tuned to the storm. When the creak of wagon wheels echoed beneath the rain, he rose at once, dragging his coat on. By the time he reached the yard, the wagon was gone, its tracks already blurring under the flood. He cursed under his breath and saddled his horse. The storm clawed at him, lightning slicing the sky white. The trail led down toward the old pass, then veered suddenly. Through the downpour he glimpsed torches, Harlan's men unloading crates into another wagon. Too many of them for him to face alone. He turned back, fury simmering. The trap had been sprung, but not on Harlan. Instead, the bait had been stolen outright. By morning, the yard buzzed with confusion. The wagon that arrived at the assay office contained nothing unusual. No glowing dust, no marked bars. The bait was gone. Sarah stood rigid, mud spattered on her hem. He knew, she whispered. Harlan knew where the shipment would be. Michael clenched his fists. The only way Harlan could have known was if someone had leaked their plan. But who? The answer seemed to come soon enough. That afternoon, Rosa, the tavern keeper, with ears sharper than knives, cornered Sarah near the well. Her voice was low, urgent. "I saw Harlan last night, meeting in secret with that bankman Dawes." Sarah stiffened. "Mr. Dawes," Rosa nodded, "slipped into the alley behind my saloon." Papers changed hands, looked cozy, the two of them. The words hit like a hammer. Sarah's mind raced. If Harlan was working with the bank, and Michael had ties to Dawes too. She turned on Michael when he appeared, her eyes blazing. "You've been lying to me." He stopped short, rain still dripping from his hat. "About what?" "You and Dawes. Rosa saw you meeting him." "Is that how Harlan learned about the shipment?" "Because you fed him the plan." Michael's jaw tightened. "I never." "Don't," she snapped. "Don't tell me more lies. You're no stable hand. You know numbers, you know tricks no ranch drifter would carry. Who are you really, for a heartbeat?" Michael considered telling her everything. That he was here for the bank, that Dawes was his contact, that every ledger he touched carried the weight of foreclosure. But the words stuck. Confession now might only damn him further. Instead, he said softly, "I didn't betray you. That much you can trust." Her eyes searched his face, torn between fury and something softer. But doubt had taken root, and trust was fragile as glass. She turned away, leaving him standing in the mud. By evening, the storm had cleared, but the air was thick with consequence. Harlan strode into the yard, a folded paper in his fist. His voice carried above the miners' chatter. "Enough of this nonsense," he declared. "The mine bleeds money, the shipments vanish, and the bank won't wait forever. By this letter of temporary authority, I'm empowered to sell assets as needed. Tomorrow at auction, the Vale property will be liquidated to pay debts." Gasps and murmurs rippled. Men glanced at one another uneasily. Sarah stepped forward, fists clenched at her sides. "You can't. The deed belongs to—" She stopped herself short, biting the words before they betrayed her. "You have no right." Harlan's grin was cold. "The paper says otherwise." He waved it high, the signature bold at the bottom. "By dawn tomorrow, Redstone will be mine to sell. And no drifter, no maid, no one will stand in my way." Michael's stomach sank. The stakes had shifted from suspicion to certainty. One forged paper could end everything before proof of Harlan's crimes ever surfaced. As the miners dispersed in uneasy silence, Michael caught Sarah's gaze. For the first time since they had begun their secret pact, her eyes held not trust, not even anger, but despair. And Michael knew that if he could not untangle the knot of truth, soon both the mind and the woman he had come to care for would be lost, swallowed by the desert's appetite for secrets. The bell of St. O'Hara's chapel tolled across the valley, its bronze voice carrying through the thin desert air. One by one, miners and townsfolk filed into the square, boots crunching on the dry earth. Lanterns swung from posts, casting yellow halos against the dusk. At the center stood Harlan Pike, shoulders square, a paper clenched in his fist. He had summoned the town to witness his claim of authority, and he wore triumph, like a badge. Beside him, Sarah Vale, still wrapped in her disguise, kept her head bowed. The freckles painted across her cheeks looked darker under lantern light, the birthmark smudged as if sweat had blurred it. She clutched a small packet of papers to her chest. Michael stood a pace behind her, jaw set, every nerve on edge. Harlan raised the document. By this letter of temporary authorization, he declared, his voice ringing loud, I have the right to sell the Vale property, to satisfy the mine's debts. Tomorrow, the auction begins. Murmurs stirred through the crowd. Some nodded resigned. Others frowned uneasy. The law was distant here, and papers held power. Sarah's hands trembled. Then she stepped forward, lifting her chin. No, she said, her voice stronger than Michael expected. The property is mine, and you know it. Harlan laughed. Yours? You're a scullery maid with dirt on her hem. Her eyes blazed. With slow, deliberate motion, Sarah reached for her kerchief. Before the crowd's eyes, she stripped it away. The tangled mass of hair tumbled free, red strands, glinting in the lamplight. She scrubbed her cheek, wiping away freckles that smeared into nothing. The ugly mole fell from her skin, a scrap of grease paint, crushed in her face. She stood, revealed her true face, unhidden, pale and proud cheekbones, sharp eyes bright with defiance. Gasps rippled. A woman clutched her child closer. Miners exchanged stunned looks. Michael's heart jolted as though a bullet had struck him. He had suspected, but suspicion was nothing compared to this. The maid was gone. In her place stood the rightful daughter of the Vale line, radiant even in defiance. His chest tightened with awe-fear, and something deeper he could not name. Sarah lifted the packet she carried and unfolded a page. This is a certified copy of my father's will, she declared. Her voice trembled only once, then steadied. The estate passes to me, Sarah Vale, his only legitimate heir. You are a usurper, Harlan, and the law will not stand with you. Harlan's sneer cut through the murmurs. A copy, he spat. Where is the original? A copy proves nothing. Words written twice are still only words. Until the original appears, this is smoke. The crowd wavered, muttering. Some nodded at Harlan's words. Doubt lingered. Michael stepped forward. He had watched the argument build like thunder, and now he saw the strike. His eyes fell on Harlan's gloves, worn, stained, but under the lamplight, faint specks clung, glowing with a ghostly shimmer. The fluorescent dust. The trap had not been wasted after all. Look at his hands, Michael said, his voice carrying sharp. Lantern light shows what he touched. All eyes turned. Harlan drew back instinctively, but the glow betrayed him. The powder shimmered faintly across the creases of his gloves. Gasps echoed. Not just the gloves, came a thin voice. Tommy, the errand boy, stepped from the crowd. His hair stuck out in all directions, and his boots were too big, but his eyes were earnest. I saw his wagon last night. Took the canyon fork no shipment ever takes. Wheels left marks glowing same as those gloves. Michael seized a lantern from the post and raised it high. Let's see it then. The boy led them to the edge of the yard, where wagon ruts curved into shadow. Under the lantern's flame, Flecks of powder clung to the tracks, glowing pale green. The crowd bent low, whispering. Father O'Hara stepped forward, his robe brushing the dirt. "The dust tells truth," he said gravely. "This man tampered with the shipment." Harlan's face darkened. "Lies spun by children and drifters," he shouted. He thrust the paper high. "This letter of authorization still binds the estate to me." Michael's eyes narrowed. He had seen handwriting forged before, and something about the bold signature stirred memory. He pulled another ledger from his coat, one Sarah had shown him nights earlier. He held it beside the letter. "Father O'Hara," Michael said, "compare these lines. See here the loop of the P, the slash of the K. Harlan forged names in the payroll, and the hand is the same." The priest studied, then lifted his gaze to the crowd. "The signatures match. The letter is false." A silence fell heavy as a grave. The crowd shifted, anger building. Sarah's voice rang out clear. "You forged authority, you stole wages, you sabotaged shipments, and you dared to claim what was never yours." She held the copy of the will high. "The Vale estate is mine by blood and by law." Michael's heart surged as he watched her. Strength radiated from her, not as a maid, not even as a hidden heiress, but as herself, unmasked and unafraid. The truth had blazed out, undeniable. Harlan's sneer faltered. The glow on his gloves, the forged signature, the witness of the priest and boy, each piece was a nail in the coffin of his claim. The crowd pressed closer, voices rising with anger, demanding justice. Michael stepped to Sarah's side. For the first time since he had arrived in Redstone, he felt certainty. Secrets had been dragged into the open, and the desert could no longer hide them. The square still trembled with the echo of angry voices as Harlan Pike stood rigid, his forged papers crumpled in his fists, the glow of betraying dust staining his gloves like guilt made visible. Around him, miners who once obeyed now glared with open fury. No one drew a weapon, none was needed. The truth itself was sharper than steel. Father O'Hara's solemn voice carried across the hush. "By the witness of this town, the falsehood is clear. Harlan Pike holds no rightful claim." Harlan's protest sputtered, then died. He staggered back, eyes darting as though searching for escape. But the crowd parted only to let Mr. Dawes step forward, his coat damp with evening mist. The banker's usually measured face was grave. "The bank has reviewed these matters," Dawes said, holding his ledger high. "Until investigation is complete, all foreclosure and liquidation are frozen. No property will be sold." His gaze swept the crowd, then settled on Sarah. "The estate remains under Miss Sarah Vale's guardianship." A murmur rose, softer now, tinged with relief. The miners shifted, hope returning where despair had gnawed. Sarah straightened, her red hair gleaming unbound in the lantern glow. The disguise was gone, and in its absence she carried herself with the dignity of her name. Yet her hands trembled faintly as she folded the copy of her father's will. She had revealed herself not just to the town, but to the world. Michael watched her, his chest tight. Through every deception, through paint and shadows, he had seen flashes of this woman. But now she stood whole, unmasked, and the sight struck him deeper than he cared to admit. Harlan slunk into the darkness, guards of his own men, no longer willing to follow. Justice would catch him in time, but tonight his power was broken. When the crowd dispersed, Michael lingered by the chapel steps. The night smelled of wet earth, lantern smoke, and something new, freedom. Sarah approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the mud. "You stayed," she said quietly. "I told you I would," Michael replied. His voice was rougher than he intended. She studied him, her eyes no longer wary but searching. "At first I thought you were another enemy, another man sent to weigh the worth of silver and call it more important than people. I doubted you. I even hated you for a moment." Her hand tightened on the will, then loosened. "But you chose me. Not the bank, not your duty. Me. Michael swallowed. I was sent here to measure numbers, losses, debts, whether the land should be stripped and sold. That was the job, and I meant to do it until you. He stepped closer, his eyes steady on hers. Now I know the only truth worth standing by is you. Sarah's breath caught. Her free hand lifted hesitant, then rested against his. The touch was light, but it carried more weight than any words. All my life, I feared men would see only wealth, never me. But you saw me even when I was painted in rags. That is why I trust you, Michael Hart. He closed his fingers around hers, firm and sure. The noise of the town faded. For that moment only the two of them existed in the glow of lanterns and the hush of the desert night. You'll stay, she asked softly. If you'll have me, he said. She smiled then, the first unguarded smile he had seen from her. We'll have work to do. The mine can't run as it has. Wages must be fair and production smaller, but honest. I don't want riches. I want a home and justice for those who labor. Michael nodded. We'll cut back the silver, let the land breathe, pay the men their due, and when the rains come, we'll seed the hill with grass so horses can graze. Silver won't be the only thing growing here. A season from now, Sarah whispered, her voice carrying a promise, this place will be green. He leaned closer, forehead brushing hers. And I'll be here to see it. The lanterns flickered, the chapel bell stilled, and above them, the desert sky stretched wide and endless. Redstone, once heavy with lies, felt lighter, as though the storm had washed deceit away. They stood together, no longer heiress and agent, no longer maid and drifter, but partners bound by choice, by truth, and by a fragile but certain love. And on the silver hill under the stars, the future waited. Out here in the West, folks say silver shines brightest in the firelight. But I've come to believe the truest light comes from people brave enough to live by their hearts. Sarah Vale was never just a ragged maid. She was an heiress, with the courage to stand for justice. And Michael Hart, a wanderer in search of work, found far more than a wage. He found a home, a trust, and a love worth keeping. Maybe on that silver hill, the most precious treasure was never the ore beneath the ground, but the promise between two souls.